dear friends, there is an interesting story about a man who wanted to take his family to the Holy Land for a vacation. So he decided to take his wife and 2 children and his mother-in-law as well, who was rather sick. Once they reached the Holy Land, they did some sightseeing, and after a couple of days, his mother-in-law fell sick, and she was seriously ill, and a couple of days later, she died. Immediately, the man went to the nearby funeral home and wanted to make the arrangements and explained to him, the funeral director, the situation. The funeral director told him, you have 2 options. Either you can bury her in the Holy Land for $3,000, or you can ship your mother-in-law back to the United States for $10,000. So the man said, I will discuss this matter with my family and let you know. The next day, he went back to the funeral home and told him, I want my mother-in-law to be shipped back to the US. So the funeral director was surprised. He said, why do you want to do that? You can bury her in the Holy Land, and it is much cheaper, and you can save some money as well. Because if you want to ship her to the US, it will cost you $10,000. The man paused for a moment and said, no, I think I want to ship her back to the United States. You know, about 2,000 years back, a man died here. He was buried, but after 3 days, he came back to life. I don't want to take a chance with my mother-in-law. Nothing against any mother-in-laws here. In 1990, there was a Gulf War in the Middle East. About 12 hours after the war ended, on a Thursday, a Kansas mother received the news that every mother prays she will never receive in her life. 2 army officers walked into the factory where she worked and told her son Clayton had been killed in action. She cried and went home to mourn her loss. The next day, while she was having her coffee in the kitchen, the phone rang. The voice on the other end said, Mom, it is Clayton. I am alive. He had to repeat those words before his mother realized what he was telling. Clayton went on to say that he is very much alive, except that his hand and his foot were wounded in a landmine explosion. But apart from that, he was fine. His mother began to cry, this time tears of incredible joy. When the news reporter asked how she would celebrate her son's return home, she said, I will just hug him to death. That wonderful story has some resemblance to what happened more than 2,000 years ago. Like Jesus, the Kansas mother's son had met with death at the hands of his enemies while he was serving his country. And it was true in the case of Jesus. The news that Clayton was alive and not really dead filled the mother and his friends with great joy, just like the disciples were filled with joy. But the similarity of these 2 stories ends there. Clayton was only thought to have been dead. On the other hand, Jesus was truly dead, crucified on the cross. Clayton's new life was a restoration to his former life because he had a natural death later on. Jesus' new life was a leap forward into a higher form of life that no other human being had experienced before. Jesus' new life involved resurrection and not resuscitation. The word resurrection does not mean a restoration to one's previous life, just as it happened to Lazarus when Jesus raised him from the dead. The word resurrection designates a quantum leap forward into the totally new life that one can have. In other words, the body of Jesus that rose on Easter Sunday was radically different from the body that was crucified on Good Friday. Dear friends, Easter tells us something infinitely more. As we read today's Easter accounts from the New Testament, we see not only that Jesus was totally transformed, but it also transformed his disciples as well. Easter transformed them from a terrified group of disciples into a band of daring missionaries. At the command of Jesus, they went out. They set out to carry the message of Easter to the ends of the earth. And everywhere they went and preached the good news, the power of Easter, that the Lord's victory over sin and death began to work among the people. The power of Easter began to work miracles in the lives of people wherever the disciples went. And those miracles have not stopped yet. They still continue to work even in our times. This is the good news we are celebrating on this holiest day in the human history, that every Good Friday can be turned into an Easter Sunday in our life, except that we need to open our hearts and our lives to the power of the risen Lord. We don't have to wait until the last day of our life. We don't have to wait until we breathe our last to share the risen life of Jesus. We can begin right now, today, in this Easter celebration. It's a good news that the risen Lord is in our midst. He is very much alive in the church, and He is inviting us to a new life. May the risen Lord bless each one of us with His gift of faith, hope, and love for a glorious new beginning in our life with Jesus Christ, our risen Lord.